Hey everybody, it's Jeah Sombrio from Sum to All. Today we're going to talk about buoyancy. What is buoyancy? Buoyancy, also known as a buoyant force, is a force that is exerted on an object that is wholly and partly immersed in a fluid. Today, I'm going to show you an experiment called a floating egg. You only need a few simple items for this experiment that you'll likely already have at home. So, let's get started. For this experiment, you're going to need an empty glass, some salt, some water, and of course, an eggs. So, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our glass and we're going to fill it with water. Then we're going to take our egg and we're going to slowly and carefully drop it in, and you'll notice that the egg sinks. But this experiment is called the floating egg. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to take an empty glass again and we're going to fill it with water. But this time, we are going to add some salt. About 3 tablespoons. And after we've added the salt, we're gonna stir it. Stir it really well until the salt dissolves into the water. And it may take a few minutes for it to completely dissolve into water and to become clear again. Once the salt is completely dissolved into water, then you're going to take the next egg and you're going to do it again slowly and carefully drop it in. And this time, the egg floats. So do you know why the egg floats? The egg floats on the salt water because it is supported by the denser salt water. The fresh water is less dense than the salt water and will float on top of the salt water if poured very carefully and slowly. Density is a term used to compare the mass of same amount of two different substances. The density of the material decided whether it will sink or floats. Materials denser or heavier than a liquid will sink in it, and even liquid that is denser than another will sink. Materials that are less dense than the liquid they are in will float. For example, an egg floats in salt water because the egg is less dense than the salt water. On the other hand, if an egg is placed in fresh water, it sinks to the bottom immediately because the fresh water is less dense. If you put fresh water on top of the salt water, you will see then the egg sinks right through the fresh water and floats on top of the salt water. The heavier the liquid, the greater the density. An egg floats in salt water because the mass of the salt water displaced is equal to the mass of an egg. The egg's density is less than the density of the salt water. When an egg is placed in fresh water, it immediately sinks to the bottom of the container. When the fresh water is carefully placed on top of the salt water to form a layer, and the egg is placed in the glass, the egg drops through the fresh water and is held up by the salt water. The egg floats between a layer of salt water and a layer of fresh water because it falls through the fresh water that is supported by the denser salt water. The fresh water is less dense and will float on the salt water. And that's it for today's video. I hope you learned something about this experiment. And thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.